This week we'll be talking about Introduction to SPSS and Descriptive Statistics. So what is SPSS? It's actually an acronym for the Statistical Package for the Social Sciences, SPSS. It's one of those popular statistical packages which can perform highly complex data manipulation and analysis with simple instructions and drop-down menus. It's similar to a fast, sophisticated calculator with numerous capabilities. There's two ways to use it, but we're going to be using the drop-down menus because they seem to be less confusing to students. Here's the opening screen in SPSS. So when you first open the program, what you're going to see is that you can open a new file from the dataset, or you can open a recent file from your own desktop files. So for homework 2, you'll need to open a new dataset first to enter in the information that's given to you. And then the second part of homework 2, you'll need to open the NC birth file that's posted on D2L. When you do that, you'll get to this next screen. So this screen is the data editor window. You can see that down here in the bottom corner, we're clicking on the Data View tab. So this is after starting the program. It gives you an overview of the data that have been loaded into the program. So you can either open your existing data set, or you can enter the new data that you have by typing into the window. Typing into the window is really similar to like a spreadsheet program like Excel. And the extension of any data file saved for SPSS will be .sav. So if we take a little bit of a closer look, each row represents one participant's responses to a survey. So in this case, we have one person responded, 16 was their age, they were 34 weeks when they had their baby, they answered 2 to marital status. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Then race mom, or the race of the mother, they answered 2. Gained actually stands for weight gained, and that was 23. They did not smoke, they did not drink, and the baby's birth weight was 2,636.55 grams. So that's one person's information. And as you look down the rows, there's a number of different people in this set of data. Now, if we look at each column, it represents all the responses from all participants to one survey question. So if we look at this example that's highlighted, weeks, this is the number of weeks before giving birth. The responses across multiple participants were 34, 40, 39, 37, 37, and 39. If we then go to that bottom of that screen where we were looking at the data view first, and we click on variable view, it brings up this window, which shows the name and characteristics of the variables entered in data view. So the name is the first column, which when I enlarge it, you'll see here. Name is the first character, has to be a letter. It can't start with a number. Variable names must be unique, which means you can't have two variables with the same name, and they have to be less than 64 characters. Finally, they can't have any spaces in these names, which is why you see in number 4, race mom, there's no spaces there. Another thing people often do is put an underscore in between words that they want to have a space since spaces aren't allowed. Now if we look in the type box, the two basic types of variables that you could put in here are numeric and string. So you can identify if you're entering numbers into your data view, or if you're entering in a string. So a series of characters like letters is typically what string is for. In this course, we will almost exclusively deal with numeric data, So you don't usually have to worry too much about what that is looking like there. The next column is width. This allows you to determine the number of characters SPSS will allow you to enter for that variable. So you can make it smaller or larger, but the standard is 15. And, so if you had a number that was above 15 characters, then it wouldn't let you enter that into this data. So you'd have to change the width, but we won't have that as an issue in this class. The next column is the number of decimals. So it has to be less than or equal to 16. So you can have 0 decimal places or any number between 1 and 16. So for most of these, we have 0 decimal places, except for t-grams has 2 decimal places in our data file. Next, we have the label. This is where you can specify the details of the variable, and you can write characters with spaces up to 256 characters. So this is where you want to write what that variable name really means. So you can either put in the question from your survey or some other type of descriptive, I don't want to say label, but you want to put in some other description here of what that variable is standing for. For this example, we can say mAge. You may not know what that is if you're not familiar with this data set. So here in the label, it's the age of the mother, and that's what's recorded in that data view column is the age of the mother. And then if we go down to smoke, the label is smoking status. So those are just some examples of what that looks like. And you can always expand the label width so you could see more of what was written there. Next, let's look at the values. So this is used to suggest which numbers represent which categories when a variable has numbers that represent a category. We'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, so I'm going to skip over it for now, but that's where the values column is. Next, we have missing data. So if a data file is missing values that are specified, it would appear here. In this class, we're not going to use that feature because dealing with missing data is a whole nother beast, and I'm trying to make it as simple as possible for you guys in this class and girls. Next, columns and a line are 2 columns we don't really use. They're just for appearance, how it looks in the data view. So we don't worry about them. The measure column tells you how the variable is measured. So when I'm asking you what is the level of measurement or the scale of measurement, this is where that information goes in the data file. So we have nominal, ordinal, and then the third option is scale, which is the same as continuous for the purposes of what we discussed up till now. Then the last row is the role, and this is just how the variable was created, so we're not going to worry about, and we're definitely not going to change this at all for the class. Here all of them were input because this was a file I already had, but if you calculate a new variable, it'll have calculated as opposed to input. But we're not going to worry about that in this class. So here's the variable labels in variable view. So this provides a more detailed description of the variables since the name is short and often not enough information. In this example, we're going to take a look at the variable name weeks. So I enlarged it at the bottom of this slide, where weeks, you can see that that stands for completed weeks of gestation measured in weeks. If you were new to this particular data set, you wouldn't know what the variable week stands for. That's why we want to include this descriptive label so we can communicate the meaning, completed weeks of gestation. So next, we have the value labels in variable view, so that next column over from label. So the value label includes a codes or categories of a nominal or ordinally measured variable to avoid confusion in your analysis results. So in this example, we're going to look at the variable race mom to see what the values for race of the mother could be. So if we click on this dot 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 button next to the values that are there, it brings up this new pop-up screen. And this is where we would put in those labels when we're entering data, but it's also where you can look to see what the values are. So here we can see that this example has number 3 would be equal to someone responding American Indian as their race. And number 1 would be white, number 2 would be black, number 4 would be Chinese, and 0 would be other non-white. There's some other options too, but I didn't include them in this screenshot. But for this particular survey, those were the options that were given, and everyone who responded to the survey fell into these categories. This next window is the output viewer window. So this shows the result of any of the operations you run within SPSS during a session. It can be useful because it's a single place to find all the work that you've done. So if you try something new and it doesn't work out, you can go back and see what your previous work was. Something important here, so this screen will pop up after you run a procedure in SPSS, so it's not, it will show up when you first open it, because this top part here where it says get file is SPSS telling the computer processor to pull up that file in the program for you. And then this window will appear saying that. And then any other procedures you run will appear below that. The left frame of this viewer lists all the objects that are contained in the window. In this window, one kind of descriptive statistics summary was done, and it's labeled frequencies. Then everything else under that header refers to the objects associated with it. So on that left-hand side, we have frequencies, and then title refers to the bold title frequencies in the right-hand side of that window. The icon labeled statistics refers to the table that contains statistics, which in this example is the valid number and the number missing for this variable. The notes icon would tell you any notes that appeared between the title and the table. And this is also where warnings would appear if SPSS thought something went wrong in the analysis. So if you have a note there that's saying it thinks something went wrong, it'll appear there, and then you want to check what you're doing to make sure you're doing what you want to be doing. The outline on the left-hand side is most useful for navigating around when you have large amounts of output, and this can happen really easily when you're trying new things in SPSS. You can click on the icons in the left-hand window, and it'll scroll to that information in the right-hand side. And the red arrow appears on both sides of the frame to tell you exactly where you're looking in the navigation pane on the left and the actual output on the right.